Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I just want to show you how bad Saturday Night Live is and how, like, they've turned into, and I just did a video about this on my other channel. I made a long video about how the media is saying kids should be ratting out and going after and getting help for their QB and conspiracy theorist parents, right? And Saturday Night Live is a part of this, where the young people are more establishment, are more about doing what the beast tells them to do. They're more hooked into the beast than their parents are. And they're saying that the kids need to now parent their parents. And Saturday Night Live is a reflection of that. And this is a couple of sketches that just show you how bad Saturday Night Live has gotten.
Good evening, and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm your host and human white claw, Tucker Carlson. There's a lot to cover tonight.
The impressions on Saturday Night Live, how accurate they are, because they often do impressions of political figures. And so it can be funny in two ways. One, they do a really good impression and they nail the character and they are able to poke fun of things that are, relevant. Like Sarah Palin, Tina Fey didn't do the best impression of her, but she looked like her. And some of those jokes were pretty funny. And Sarah Palin was like an easy target, right? I can see Russia from my house. That was a quality joke, right? Sarah Palin in herself was funny, and the imitation was funny, and it was, humor that sort of wrote itself, that you could stay within the framework of what the person said, and you could act like the person, and that was funny because the person's stuff was funny in itself. And then there's like Will Ferrell's Bush. Now, he didn't do a good job of impersonating Bush, but the character that he created was funny, to some extent. So this guy does an okay job, better than you see most times, of imitating Tucker Carlson, but he's not funny. Like, the jokes aren't funny, and so the imitation's okay, but the humor isn't there.
Is AOC hiding in your house right now? Wouldn't put it past her.
And so he does like I would say a 4 out of 10 in terms of the impressions, but a 0 out of 10 in terms of the jokes. But then there's Kate McKinnon, who is just not funny. Like, I've never seen Kate McKinnon in anything, a movie, a sketch, where she cracked me up. Like, there was a joke, that she did something that wasn't like over the top, and it's like she's strange, and they think that that is somehow going to translate into funny. She's an odd person. Even when you see her in interviews, she's weird, and she's not funny. Like, she's just, it makes you uncomfortable.
Please welcome 65-year-old teacher's pet, Senator Lindsey Graham.
Thank you, Tucker. It's a great day for 30% of America, and tonight.
So Saturday Night Live decided that they were going to have women play men. Like, they've been doing that for the past 4 or 5 years, where they're going to have their female cast members imitate men. And other than Fauci, like, she's done 4 or 5 men imitations, and they're all bad. I mean, they're horrible. Fauci, she does a pretty good job, okay job on, but it's still not funny, right? The imitation's bad, and it's not funny.
We party.
Wow. Well, Lindsey, you're obviously very happy about the verdict.
Look.
So he's doing a mediocre, not funny impersonation of Tucker Carlson. She's doing an abysmal, not funny impersonation of Lindsey Graham. And they're on the wrong side of this politically. So it's like 3 major strikes, right?
Maybe even some Eric stands. I don't know. But regardless, the trial is over, and now we can move past this and focus.
She sounds like she has a cold, and she's pretending to be Southern.
This bastard, get in here, Ted Cruz.
Wow, Senator Cruz, welcome to the show.
So then they double down and have another female cast member imitate Ted Cruz. And it's probably as bad or worse.
Well, thanks, Tucker. Wait, what does it say below me? Oh, yeah, that's what Trump said about my wife.
And so, like, why even bother making this? This is their cold open. This is their big sketch. This is what's supposed to be, the second impeachment happened. and this is their take on it, and it fails on such an epic level. I mean, it's hard to really even process how bad it is, right?
In attending,
Like any impartial juror, we took it upon ourselves to meet with the defense lawyers to give them some very simple...
She has a very high voice, and so does Kate McKinnon, but not as high. And so it's really hard to drop it down and make it sound like a man's voice and do what they're saying is a Southern accent.
Counsel, I know the difference, but as Trump's bailiff, nope, not right either. Bridesmaid, nope, sorry, I need a second.
Wow. Like, I'm embarrassed for them.
And now the House wants to bring up witnesses over Zoom? Zoom? I can't afford to Zoom. You think I'm getting paid for this? And this is...
Wow.
President. That's why we should have impeached him before, back when I said we couldn't.
Well, that logic pretzels out, but what do you...
This is 7 minutes of pure agony. So the reason I'm making this video is because of this. Somebody either sent this to me or I saw it somewhere. Maybe it was part of an article somewhere. But they get this so wrong. This is supposed to be mocking the news and mocking the political power. And the political power has obviously not been Trump for the past 5 years. The media and most of the political power has been anti-Trump. Trump had his Twitter and he had his ability to do some executive orders, and he was able to get a few things done here or there. But for the most part, he was denutted shortly after taking his presidency. So he was mostly just a figurehead. But these guys have carried on like Trump has been the power when they're really working for the real power and the intelligence community, which should be abhorrent to any comedian with any sense. In terms of truth to power.
This has to be the dumbest trial I've ever seen. Here's how dumb.
So this guy, who is probably the least funny cast member and thinks he's a big-time celebrity.
Dumb it was. The jurors who were deciding the case were the ones attacked by the defendant. The trial...
How were they attacked by the defendant? They weren't attacked by him. Was Trump running around with a hockey stick or something? Was Trump really the QAnon shaman? In fact, he didn't even attack anybody. Because none of the senators and none of the people, none of the House members, none of the famous people, none of the politicians was actually physically attacked. The police were attacked. The police weren't the jurors. You can see the police getting hit and stuff like this. Pushed around. I mean, there's, injuries and deaths of police people. But the famous people didn't get attacked.
This egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So you can see there he said peacefully and patriotically. Now he did use the word fight 20 times, and he said other things, which you can find on the internet. I looked for this particular clip, and they show this clip, but they always edit out the part where he says peacefully and patriotically. They removed that. I mean, this is mainstream media. You can't find this clip anywhere. I had to go back to the whole, go through the whole speech, the full speech. I went to a transcript and I searched it and I figured out where it was so I didn't have to watch the whole speech. But you can't find this peacefully and patriotically. They got all the other stuff in there, but the peacefully and patriotically, that means that he was saying to them, go up there and march patriotically and peacefully and make your voices heard. That's what he said. He said nothing about doing any sort of violence. And the other rhetoric and things that he said was typical political speech where they say fight, and I covered that before. Plus, if they're saying that they listen to Trump, that the, rioters listened to Trump and he provoked them, well, why didn't they listen to him when he said peacefully, patriotically, and allow your voices to be heard? Like, if they were listening to hanging out his every word, then they would have listened to that part as well. And so their argument and his argument is null and void. Not that Trump, he showed poor leadership, he made bad decisions. None of it was good, but he didn't make them act out violently.
The trial took place at the scene of the crime, and then right after the trial ended, one of the jurors who voted to acquit Trump ran out and said, someone's got to prosecute this guy. He did it.
So that's a little bit true. That was weird that he would, vote against it and then say Trump's still responsible, but that's not weird because that's Mitch McConnell. So that's a little bit of a joke, right? But he got the first part wrong. The middle part, a little bit.
This man belongs in jail. I mean, what if you're going to do? Are you going to impeach a president for anything? Don't you think it's sending a mob to kill the vice president?
See, he didn't do that. He didn't send a mob to kill the vice president. He brought a bunch of angry people up to Capitol Hill, and he brought them to the steps of the Capitol. That's all he did. Now, we don't know if he thought, well, maybe they'll go in. We don't know if he imagined that this possibly would happen. I think he should have. It was poor leadership, but we don't know. And even if he did, he didn't instruct them to do any of those things. So that's the problem here. And that's what the Democrats had to prove. That the language that everybody uses, fight words, and we got to fight, which was shown, by a real comedic team, which was Trump's lawyers, who put on a much better show than this, wannabe comedian, right? But none of those things he said was true. Trump didn't attack them. Trump didn't send them up to kill the vice president. That didn't happen. They weren't assassins. Mostly were dopes. We're just following along. And, real people got hurt and things got out of hand, but they weren't, an organized group of assassins like the Democrats said. And so on the merits of the case, everybody should have voted to acquit because they didn't prove. The prosecution did not prove that Trump conspired to send them there to do what they did. He brought them up to the Capitol, he riled them up, and he set them loose, but he didn't do anything directly related to what happened afterwards. It was poor leadership. Trump sucks. I'm not giving Trump a pass, but he didn't commit the crime here. And this is just another example of the younger generations here and content aimed at younger people is so establishment centered. Where young people are usually against the establishment is some sort of invertendo. And this young generation loves authority and loves the official story, right? At least in terms of the mainstream media.
I feel bad for Pence. 43 of his work friends were like, oh, come on, Mike. They only tried to hang you. Stop being such a drama queen.
Yeah, that's not what happened either. Again, not funny and not true, right? This is pretty much Saturday Night Live's slogan should be not funny and not true and on the wrong side of history. Saturday Night Live, stay up late on Saturday night and watch us fail. And this was the same horrific episode. Horrific episode where Kate McKinnon played a witch who joined QAnon, and she was interested in joining QAnon because she wanted to find out how she could eat some children. And again, what the whole case against Trump is, his influence through his words made people act out in a way that was, not good, right? And these guys are putting out ideas like they're pro-eating children here. They're putting out bad ideas. So much of everything that Hollywood does and what politicians do and our whole culture is putting out violent ideas and abusive ideas and, movies about pro-criminal movies where criminals and serial killers are the protagonists. I mean, there's all these things. So if you're going to hold Trump accountable, you should hold Saturday Night Live and these other, Hollywood and other politicians accountable for what they're promoting as well.
And to eat children. I hear that and I'm like, whoa, where?
So speaking of sucking desperately in New York, let's go to Andrew Cuomo's, because he had this horrific apology and even CNN is turning on him a bit.
Tonight, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is responding to the growing scandal surrounding his administration's handling of COVID-19 deaths at nursing homes. He's admitting mistakes but denying a cover-up. CNN national correspondent Bryn Gingras has our report.
We made a mistake.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo finally speaking out days after his top aide admitted their office withheld data for months about COVID-19 deaths of nursing home residents.
Yeah, it was like 4,000 deaths that they didn't report. There's no way to walk this back, especially after what his aide said.
Cuomo acknowledging on Monday that the data was not provided soon enough.
In retrospect, we should have prioritized providing more information.
This is how sleazy this dude is. You just underreported 4,000 deaths. You need to add 4,000 deaths. I mean, on a computer, you just change the number of deaths that you're reporting by the whatever, 4,100, whatever it was, right? You understand this? We should have shared information. No, you should have just not hidden 4,000 deaths. That's what you did. You sleazy MFer. You hid 4,000 deaths. We should have put out a telephone book's worth of information. No, you just got to change like 4 digits. When somebody asks you, "Hey, Cuomos, how many people died in New York from COVID?" and you say the truth, you give them the real number. It's not like debatable. I don't know. 12, 40,000. I'm not sure. There's a number. It's a statistic. You give them the actual information. You didn't do that. There's nothing else you need to. You can't spin this thing. I'm gonna get back to his press conference later on. It's hilarious. At least this part is.
But arguing that the state's death counts were accurate and that information was not hidden.
To be clear, all the deaths in the nursing homes and in the hospitals were always fully, publicly, and accurately reported.
Until late last month, New York only accounted separately for people who died from COVID-19 in long-term care facilities like nursing homes, but the data didn't include the number of residents from those facilities who died after they were transferred to a hospital or elsewhere.
So what really happened was this. Now, I found this webpage from MSNBC early on in the corona thing, right? What you see here is that New York led in deaths till basically a couple days ago when California passed them. But California passed them before, but then they had to add in 4,000 extra deaths. I mean, when I saw this, because you see that California has twice as many cases, but they have about the same amount of deaths because New York did a horrible job. It was also about Cuomo forcing, them putting people on respirators and 9 out of 10 of those people dying. Unnecessarily, most of them. Not giving them the proper care. I mean, this is why New York, there was some things that they did to have the most amount of deaths per cases. In terms of the ratio between cases and deaths, New York and that whole area is the worst part of the world, right? I mean, they're leading in COVID deaths. And I was saying, how can they call this guy a hero? They were parading this guy around like he was a hero, and he was killing more people than anybody. I mean, they had the most cases and the most deaths early on. And so it was a disaster in New York, And so what happened was they hid 4,000 cases, and then all of a sudden their number jumped by 4,000 because this number jumped because, they now had to report those cases. And so any kind of spin he tries to put on it isn't accurate.
The public had many questions and concerns, and the press had many questions about nursing homes primarily. And I understand that they were not answered quickly enough.
The tipping point came when, in a private video call, the governor's top aide, Melissa DeRosa, told Democratic state lawmakers they delayed giving updated information to them after then-President Trump's Department of Justice sent an inquiry about nursing home deaths in the state because, quote, basically we froze because then we were in a position where we weren't sure if what we were going to give to the Department of Justice or what we give to you guys, what we start saying was going to be used against us.
Which means that they didn't want to tell the other officials, the legislature, the amount of deaths because they were being investigated and they didn't want to incriminate themselves, so they hid evidence, right? Like, you know, they were being investigated for Cuomo's abysmal handling of COVID, even though he was celebrated like some sort of hero. And so she just told you what happened there. Because they asked her, well, how come you guys never revealed these deaths? And they knew this was going to come out at some point. They waited till basically after the election was resolved, and they said, yeah, there was 4,000 more deaths. They're like, what? What happened? I don't know. You know, and plus Cuomo, the way he's talking about this is like he robbed a bank, and they're saying, hey, what about that bank you robbed? They said, oh, I didn't murder anybody. Like, just admit to what you did here. You covered up. This is a cover-up. You were being investigated, so you withheld data so you wouldn't look as bad. You underreported deaths.
Her words, an admission that the administration stalled on showing a true picture of just how many nursing home residents died, just as the governor was lauded globally for his pandemic response.
Between his Emmy for his coronavirus press briefings, to Governor Cuomo's book, to his speech at the Democratic National Convention, Governor Cuomo has been held up as the model governor in his coronavirus response, even though New York was so hard hit by the virus early on.
I guess it's a good thing it's coming out now, and I covered this now for, I don't know. I mean, early on when I started looking at the statistics, and I saw how bad New York was doing, and he was the #1 governor. I was like, wait, he has the most deaths, and they're turning him into a hero? Like, how crazy has this gotten? Like, with the media, you know, he was swaggering along, and he was like, how great a job he was doing, and he had more deaths under his watch than any other governor. Now it's finally coming around. I got a Fauci thing too. There's a little Fauci thing. I got the press conference. I mean, there's still more stuff to come on this thing. Let's get through this report, because even CNN, where his brother works, is having to take him down. So this is, you know, as soon as Trump was gone, and I said this, when Trump is gone, then a lot of this stuff is going to come to the surface, because they're going to have to report on something, right? There's not going to be Trump to kick around anymore. Trump is 80 or 90% of the news. I mean, Trump dominated everything. Now, you know, these people, these fake heroes, these liars and cheats, it's all going to come around. Like, there's no stopping it.
Cuomo arguing today much of the same as his top aide, that the request for data from former President Trump's Department of Justice was politically motivated, but took priority over the state legislature's request.
Everybody was working 24 hours a day. Everybody was overwhelmed. We were in the midst of dealing with a pandemic and trying to save lives. They were answering DOJ.
He's now taking heat from both sides of the New York legislature.
The gravity of this cover-up cannot be overstated.
Republicans declaring he should be investigated, some even using the word impeachment.
Everybody likes to use that word.
Andrew Cuomo must be prosecuted, and Andrew Cuomo must be impeached if this evidence exists.
And Democrats are actively discussing drafting a bill to strip Cuomo of his emergency powers. You're only sorry that you all got caught, tweeted Democratic Senator Alessandra Biaggi.
And as you'll see from the part of the press conference I'm going to cover, and what you just saw here, Cuomo's deflecting. You understand this? When you do something and you don't address what you do, what you did directly, that they withheld information, and he made up a bunch of stupid excuses, like they were too busy, they didn't have enough time. even though every day, every weekday, he had like an hour and a half long press conference. He wrote a book. He won an Emmy for those, he was appearing on his brother's show, and they have a huge staff, and they couldn't get 4,000, some numbers over there. It wasn't like they needed a 12-page report. It was just telling them, hey, there's more deaths than we told you or we've been telling you, because they withheld the deaths. They hid them. They hid them from the state, and they hid them from the federal government. And the fact that he's not addressing that, they withheld information for, because they thought they might get in trouble, means that he's really guilty, And it might just go away because, I don't know, the media does that now. Like, nobody gets held to account anymore. But he did this, right? He's done. Like, this is something that, should crush his political career. But God knows now with the ghouls they got in there, anything goes.
And a big question here is, will what the governor said today be enough to satisfy all of his critics right now? You got to remember, Wolf, one of the things he mentioned in today's news conference is that his administration didn't have time to give numbers to both the DOJ and to state lawmakers. But I've already seen from critics, then how did he have time to write a 300-plus page book about his response to the pandemic? So these are sort of the things that we'll probably likely continue to hear possibly plague the governor even as he's up for re-election.
Apologize. Look, I have said repeatedly, we made a mistake in creating the void.
What is this void that you speak of?
We made a mistake in creating the void. When we didn't provide information, it allowed press, people, cynics, politicians to fill the void. When you don't correct disinformation,
are you talking about your nipple rings?
You allow it to continue. And we created the void, not because people weren't working hard, Mike, because you know how hard people were working.
People were working really hard. Mike knows. Mike knows about hard workers.
And, well, you should have prioritized providing more information. Yes. Yes. In retrospect, we should have prioritized providing more information. I get the operational demand. I don't like to second guess my team.
But he likes to throw them under the bus, which he just did.
They were all working 24 hours a day. Remember where this was? You're in the middle of hell during this time.
And he knows about being in the middle of hell.
But no excuses. No excuses.
Said the guy who just made 5 different big excuses.
Excuses. We should not have created the void.
He's taking full responsibility creating a void. The void.
Should have done a better job in providing information. We should have done a better job of knocking down the disinformation. You'd never knock down all these conspiracy theories, the political conspiracy theories, because they generate 10 a day. But
because they have conspiracy theory generators out there. Wow, look at looks like some sort of a puppet here.
Should have done a better job of providing as much information as we could.
We should have done something like hold a 3-hour press conference where I danced around and flaunted and bragged and I should have done a better job, something like that. Put out a lot of information on a daily basis, holding some sort of lunchtime press conference that was covered by the national media. Something like that would have worked, maybe to create, so we wouldn't have created the void
as quickly as we could. And we should have done a better job on that. Yes. And no excuses.
Yeah, like that's an excuse because, what about 4,000 people that died that you didn't account for? That wasn't. And what about being the #1 place for COVID deaths in the world per capita? Like, what about those things? And then being celebrated like a hero and writing a book and all these things.
I accept responsibility for that. I am in charge. I take responsibility.
Just like I just have a knack of stopping at the right time.
There's actually a term in dating now called Fauciing someone. Do you know what that means?
No, what does it mean?
It means cutting off a relationship if you don't think that that other person is serious enough about social distancing and taking the pandemic seriously. Like, oh, I Fauci'd that guy.
I'm going to Fauci you.
You already have, right? You've already Fauci'd us all. And so, I mean, that's a deal breaker the other way, right? For people who are, who are really gung-ho about social distancing and wearing masks. Again, I had COVID and it sucked. Like, I don't want it again. And if the stuff worked, I'd do it. If I could trust them and, it made sense what they were saying and it wasn't a part of some other agenda. But think about how much sucking is going on in New York right now. I mean, you have all the stuff with Saturday Night Live. The episodes are getting worse and worse. It's getting more depraved and, less funny and just sad and pathetic. And they're just shilling for the beast. And then you have this thing with Cuomo. And I said this, as soon as Trump disappears, a lot of this stuff's going to come out because they won't have Trump as a singular person. When you have a combined enemy, when you have an enemy. I mean, these Democrats and the coalition that makes up the Democratic Party between the liberals and the conservative Dems, right, the moderate Dems, the Bidens versus the AOCs, and the Sanders, right, more the Sanders. And it's a coalition that's barely holding together. And everybody wants to get their piece of the pie, and there's no pie to give. And so, for you Trumpers, at least you have that to look forward to, watching them fall apart, just like the Republicans are falling apart now between the Trumpers or the traditional Republicans. But in the end, this is a spiritual time where truth is coming to the surface. Like all the stuff that was on the bottom of the pool, like the heaviest dirt goes to the bottom of the pool, like the cesspit, and that stuff's coming up. And nobody can stop it, right? There's a spiritual movement happening, a spiritual revolution, even though people aren't totally aware of it, but their souls are working on it. The heartfulness meditation that they do. There's something that's happening in the world. And, internally, not in the world, but internally to human beings. And there's, something ends, like a divorce. When there's a divorce and things come to the surface, all the, bitterness and negative things you've been suppressing come out in the divorce, and that's what we're seeing now. And there just ain't no stopping it. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.